Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive's #1, #2 employee. Leave a message at the... Hey, Jamie, it's me, Jamie. This is your daily pep talk. I know it's been rough going ever since people found out about your a cappella group, Mad Harmony, but you will bounce back. I mean, you're the guy always helping people find coverage options with the Name Your Price tool. It should be you giving me the pep talk. Now get out there, hit that high note, and take Mad Harmony all the way to nationals this year! Sorry, it's pitchy.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
It's time to unravel the hidden mysteries of the universe. Time to uncover the truth hidden beneath the veil of lies. Time to transport your mind from the perverted matrix and connect with your higher consciousness into the world of the divine paradigm. The divine paradigm. And now your hosts of the divine paradigm, Dr. Sasha Lesson and Janet Kira Lesson.
Aloha and welcome to the Divine Paradigm. And I'm on KCOR Radio, and I'm your host, Janet Kira Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson. Say hello. Say aloha.
Hello. Aloha.
Aloha. And today we have a very special guest, Andrew D. Basiago. And Andrew is an attorney and the team leader of Project-Pegasus. He's the founder and president of Mars, which is a online, I guess it's an online Facebook page. I'll have to ask him about that. He's an American lawyer, writer, chrononaut, and 21st century visionary. And he served in Project Pegasus at the dawn of the time-space age and was one of humanity's early Mars explorers. Yes, that is Mars. He is a prominent figure in the truth movement, leading a campaign to lobby the U.S. government to disclose such truths as the fact that the U.S. has achieved quantum access to past and future events and has used time travel to place a secret U.S. presence on Mars. And Andy has been identified as the first of two planetary-level whistleblowers predicted by the Webbot, which analyzes the content of the World Wide Web to discern global trends. His truth campaign about time, travel, and life on Mars is based on direct personal experience serving on the two U.S. defense projects. One less paragraph or sentence, and I will pass it to Dr. Lesson. In the late 1960s and early 70s, and he was a child participant in Project Pegasus, which was the U.S. time-space exploration program at the time of the emergence of time travel in the U.S. defense technical community. Sasha, Dr. Lesson, what would you like to say before we bring on Andy?
Andrew Basiago is running as a write-in candidate for president, and I'm completely serious that he offers the only real opportunity to break the wall of secrets that murders millions and that keeps us from the medical and transportation technologies that can make life on this planet the paradise that it is meant to be. I really hope you listen well, and I do hope you vote for Andy. And when you listen to his program, I bet you those of you who can think will.
Move over, Donald and Hillary, and make way for Andrew D. Basiago. Welcome, Andrew. Andy.
Hi, Janet.
How are
Hi,
you
Dr.
today?
Lesson. Excellent. It's good to be with you again. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm really excited that you're here on our premiere episode of KCOR Radio, Divine Paradigm. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule
honored
to join us.
Yeah, I feel honored to be part of your maiden broadcast like this. It's quite an exciting thing you've got going, and I wish you the best with it. I'm sure it's going to be wonderful in the coming years.
Oh, definitely. And we're real excited about your 100 proposals. And would you like to tell us what they are?
Well,
what do you
one
mean
thing
by
that was
that?
clear, I've had the opportunity of learning by doing. When I set out on this campaign last year, I didn't really have the goal necessarily of winning the presidency. I wanted to immerse myself in the presidential electoral process and just see what makes it tick, and what I'm convinced is actually happening is I'm going to go out a little bit on a limb tonight. I think it's a scripted reality. I think the main candidates being advanced by the mainstream media, I wouldn't describe them as the leading candidates because they haven't really earned either the inevitable or at this point even the practical support of the American people. But I think they're actors reading from a script. And I think it's a loose script. I think it's an impromptu script, but I think it's a script nonetheless. Because one of the things that's quite curious, when I jumped into the campaign, into the race, and began to wage my own campaign, is that they don't have any plan for the country. And so somebody suggested, well, why don't you advance your plan? I said, okay, I'll give you 100 things that the next president should be doing. I'm now at 86, so I'm soon to release my 100 proposals, a new agenda for a new America. And I think the most effective presidents, at least in the modern instance, have been presidents like John Fitzgerald Kennedy and Ronald Wilson Reagan, a Democrat and a Republican, in the sense that they understood that the president should set broad goals and then allow the creativity and hard work and ingenuity of the American people to implement those goals. And so, as I entered the race, it occurred to me that, Marco Rubio has published a plan, but I wouldn't call it a comprehensive plan. So of the original 19 establishment candidates, one had anything approaching a plan. In other words, being generated by the conceit of having a plan. So what I decided to do was first ask myself why I was running. And I determined that I'm running because I want to see the president be the catalyst for the return of truth, reform, and innovation to the American presidency. And so under each of those rubrics, I have developed actual proposals of where to take the country. Those are my 100 proposals. So I've just about finished it. I'm a little bit worn out from knocking my head beside this subject. For
that was a big task, 100 proposals. And
right,
you
and
could have
it
stopped
was
at
a sincere
50.
effort. I went basically into semi-seclusion and really did some deep thinking about where I would take the country and what I think we need to work on. So I have a set of proposals in the areas of truth, reform, and innovation, and I'll be releasing those in about a week after I complete the remaining 14 out of 100. But I really spent time on it. I developed a kind of a style where I basically developed the proposal in 4 sentences.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of it's modeled sort of.
Tell us.
Huh?
So tell us about your 4 sentences.
Well, I basically make an observation of something that's a truism for the time we're living in, and then I qualify that statement with an example, and then I state where I would take the country and then how I would do that. So I kind of got into a rhythm where I really developed a plan for the country and what we should be focusing on. And if people trust in my leadership and believe in these principles, then I think that I've got a chance of generating a lot of support here now that we're about 9 or 10 months out from the election. I entered, by the way, at the time that is traditional. I kind of opposed what the establishment candidates were doing, which is they violated the long-standing tradition in the United States of America of running for president only in the last year of the sitting president's presidency, regardless of party affiliation, regardless of their opinion about the sitting president. It's been an abiding tradition of our country. Many of them came in almost fully 2 years before the conclusion of Barack Obama's second term. I waited, so I wasn't hemming and hawing. I didn't fall back, as somebody recently said on Facebook. I wasn't daunted by the task of running. I was abiding by the tradition of only running during the last year. So I announced my campaign for president on December 19th on Coast to Coast AM. I reached 600 stations. I actually had one of the largest announcement audiences of any candidate because I had the 600 stations that is in the Premier's radio network. And so I was always intending to run. I was just abiding but what I think is a pretty important tradition of not occupying the last 2 years of a president's term with electioneering regarding the person who's going to be replacing him. So I said, I don't care if it costs me the election. I'm going to wait, and I'm going to jump in a year or a little bit less than a year before the election. So by comparison, for example, Bill Clinton announced in October of 1991, Ronald Reagan announced in November of 1979, and we forget that Robert F. Kennedy, before being assassinated, declared on March 16th of 1968. I mean, so we've had viable presidential candidacies that have been formally announced even later than I announced back on December 19th, even later.
Kennedy would have been in, what, 58? You said 68. 58, right?
Well, not JFK.
Robert Kennedy.
Oh, Robert.
Jared.
Oh, Robert.
Yeah.
Well, oh, yeah, that's right. He announced. Yeah,
He was clearly going to win if he hadn't been killed.
Oh, yeah, he was going to win.
Right,
yeah.
right. So there we had somebody who was a shoo-in who announced by only as late as March of the year of the election. So we've lost sight of that tradition, that the 4 years of the sitting president shouldn't be about having the microphone stolen by a bunch of candidates running for his office. We should limit the electioneering period for the next presidency to a year or less. And that's what I did by declaring on December 19th.
So would you make this into a? Would you propose that the Congress pass some kind of resolution to that effect?
Perhaps it should be made federal law that the campaign should not begin, at least in terms of formal declarations, until 1 year before the general election. You know, there's two other. Since you mentioned it, Dr. Lesson, let me address this. There's two other issues that relate to how we select the president. The first is that the phrase natural-born citizen that's stated in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5 of the U.S. Constitution, that language was selected by the framers in reference to a work by a French political philosopher named Vattel. And natural-born citizen, in his work, The Law of Nations, published in 1756, referred to somebody it was a two-pronged test. You had to be born in the country of parents who were themselves citizens. Now, over time, in the intervening more than 200 years now, 227 years since the Constitution was amended in 1789, that standard for citizenship has been basically diluted, so that, as we know from the phenomenon of the anchor baby, the remaining test for being a citizen of the United States is to have been born here. So, for example, illegal aliens can come here, have a baby here on U.S. territory, on U.S. soil, and that child can be a citizen by virtue of birth. So they diluted the standard of the parents having to be themselves citizens. There was an exception made for John McCain because he was born of two American parents in the Panama Canal Zone at the time that his father was serving in the United States Navy. So we've kind of grappled in an imperfect way with this test. So
let me see. The base, a U.S. base counts as though it's the U.S. homeland. Is that what you're saying?
Well, actually, unless you apply the Ile-de-France doctrine that an American embassy or military base is U.S. soil, which is essentially a legal fiction. No, that's not the case. John McCain could be disqualified under the Vattel standard because while he qualified being born of two American parents who were themselves United States citizens, he didn't satisfy the sole remaining prong of the two-pronged Vattel standard, which was to be born physically in the country. So in addition to setting the electioneering period at 1 year, I would favor Congress, I would favor the next president. It's actually one of my 100 proposals. I think because of the doubts about the nationality of Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012, and now of Ted Cruz, whose foreign nationality is not even disputed. Ted Cruz was born in Canada of Cuban-born parents.
Wow.
There's some claim that his mother may have been born in Delaware, but if the sole surviving prong of the Vattel standard is to have been born in the country, the issue is right there out in the open. Ted Cruz was not born in the United States of America. He was born in Canada. Okay, so I think that the next president should ask Congress to define what natural-born citizen means. It was, after all, in Marbury v. Madison that the Supreme Court gave itself the freedom or the franchise to analyze the constitutionality of legislation. But let's first ask for the legislation. Let's ask Congress to declare what natural-born citizen means. And the third area, and then let the High Court try to resolve it if somebody, for example, let's say a Ted Cruz sues under and says that's unconstitutional. This could go different ways. But the bottom line is right now, we don't have an understanding or an agreement around what the framers meant by natural-born citizen. Does it mean to have just been physically born in the country of two parents who were themselves citizens, one parent, the mother, which is certainly would be a common law standard to trace ancestry or nationality through the mother? Or does it have to be both parents? Could it be born of the father? Should we use a patriarchal notion? We just don't have an agreement as a society as to what the
What do you think it should be?
Yeah,
what do you think?
And even how to establish what the paternity is.
Yeah,
that becomes ambiguous.
Well, certainly we know from anthropology that 1 out of 10 births is by a father who was an interloper. So that, in fact, is the case.
Right.
A natural-born woman.
So would we require DNA tests for our candidates?
Well, I think because if we look at Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5, we also find that in addition to being natural born, there's a requirement that the person be resident in the United States for 14 years. So I think especially if we also consider that we were breaking away from Great Britain, and in fact that the War of 1812 even amounted to ultimately almost a retaking of the country. I mean, the White House was burned down by the British in 1812. That the concern of the country was foreign influence. And so I would make the standard stringent, not out of the atavism or nativism of a Donald Trump, but just common sense, just good old American common sense. And that is to say that I would ask Congress, if I was president, if I become president in 2017, I will ask Congress to make the standard born in the country of two parents who were themselves citizens. And in that way, whoever does get elected, there's no, unless they've spent a lot of time overseas and don't qualify as adhering to the 14-year residency rule, there's very little chance that you can argue foreign influence unless it can be practically proved. Let's say through social.
I guess one consequence that I see of that procedure, should it ever pass, is that people who are about to give birth and they want their child not to be disadvantaged and have a shot at the presidency would come home to the States to bear their kid.
Yes, and secure their nationality, which people do.
Yeah.
And then there's another third thing I learned by running, and that is as to foreign nationality, or looking at it from another perspective, as to nationality, nobody's checking. When you fill out the forms with the Federal Election Commission, you have to declare your date and place of birth. But then there's no demand for a birth certificate or for any proof of what you're asserting. I mean, I've been joking about this with my staff, I could have been an extraterrestrial or, a Polish national. Nobody checks.
There you are.
I mean, we have literally a Canadian who's running for the Republican nomination in Ted Cruz. A Cuban.
So you could just by administrative action, were you the president, say check the refs.
Well, yes, administratively, by executive order, the president could order a commission, a federal executive branch commission, the Federal Election Commission, to do their job and demand, let's say, a birth certificate. Because that's upholding the Constitution, which is the law of the land. So that would be a completely legitimate presidential function under an executive order. It wouldn't really be an order making the candidates do something. It would be an order making a federal agency do something, the Federal Election Commission, and therefore be an entirely constitutional action by the president. So I'm very disturbed that an extraterrestrial, a foreign national or somebody imposturing somebody else can be lawfully certified to run for the presidency of the United States. So those are the three problems: running too early, not knowing what we mean by natural-born citizen, having it sometimes being altered by legislative fiat, as it was in the case of Senator McCain in 2008, which is not really a standard of justice. That was a standard of favoritism. And then the fact that we have to verify who these people are as satisfying the constitutional standard of nationality that the framers wished to use on the candidates.
Yeah. Before you leave the idea of the presidential elections, I really would like to know what you propose to do about Citizens United, which has so distorted the whole process.
Well, my administration would challenge it, and they're actually giving me more materials to complete my 100 proposals, which ended up being pretty daunting in terms of the number itself. That sounds like Proposal 87. I mean, Citizens United has to be overturned. It literally states that somebody who has more money has more vote. It's not one man, one vote. It's one fortune, one vote. It essentially allows for an unlimited amount of private spending on the races for public offices. That is corruption per se, Dr. Lesson, and I don't think that we should allow it in this great country. So I would seek to overturn Citizens United by legislation.
Glad to hear you say that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay,
Legislated
this
out
is
of existence, as it were.
we have a 90-minute show, so we're at 52, and we go break at 58. So I'd like to start into the proposals.
Yeah, read the first one.
I began by talking about your bio, about the technologies, that you were on Mars, and I made some very broad, big statements there. So your first one under truth is your new agenda for a new America is disclosing secret advanced technologies. So right. I suppose that you got to Mars and into the time travel program because of these advanced secret technologies.
Read that.
And can I read this? Okay, I'll read this. For 70 years, the U.S. government has been concealing advanced technologies because they might be socially, economically, or technically disruptive in nature. These technologies include teleportation technology developed by DARPA's project-pegasus. They may also include cancer cures. The government should begin a program to declassify and deploy this knowledge. The standard of technical disclosure should be what provides the people the best available technology. This will enable the United States to reclaim its mantle as the world's catalyst of applied science. So
that sort
let's
of
address that
encapsulates
first.
that encapsulates how I've written the proposals to kind of assess where we've been, where we are, where we need to go, and how to get there. And in fact, these are not in any order right now. This is a draft copy that you're reading from. We do have 86 reduced to JPEGs. But this one just got written first because this was the number one issue that the people I sent to contact in the desert last June came back and said, Andy, they are most concerned about, they think the number one public policy issue is that the government is holding back life-advantaging technologies. And, I entered public life as a whistleblower, describing my experiences in time travel and DARPA's Project Pegasus, so I know what I'm talking about here. We were doing things 40 years ago in Project Pegasus that quite reasonably the general public, the American people, would consider science fiction. So we are in as I've said on many, many interviews, we are in a crisis as a civilization. It's a constitutional crisis specifically in the sense that future presidents are being apprised of their presidencies decades in advance of winning the presidency and taking office. I was one of them. I've already revealed the fact that I was identified by the CIA utilizing DARPA's time travel technology as a future president, and unlike Presidents Bush, Obama, Bush, and Clinton, I got that out of order. Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama.
Right.
I decided to come forward and tell the American people the truth, that there is an inside class in this country. It consists of people who are being used as assets by the alphabet intelligence agencies. And one of the ways...
it's a two-caste system, basically. A two-caste, the upper caste and the rest of us.
Well, I look at it not as upper or lower because there's even outsiders on the top of the financial and opportunity, and even political food chain. I think it's a matter of insiders and everybody else. If the alphabet intelligence agencies need to bring you in, they do. They brought me in. They brought me in because they were told to. They were told by project personnel in the future to bring me in.
Yeah.
So
you're saying that teleportation and medical information are the two main things that you would be able to reveal, and that would tremendously benefit the United States and perhaps the world.
I'm using those as examples. I'm saying that the ability to travel virtually instantaneously and things medically as powerful as cancer cures are among the things that the United States government has been holding back, as if to keep us stuck in the transportation and medical technologies of the 1970s, because they don't want to disrupt the apple carts that sustain themselves in office, namely corporate donations. Look at Hillary outperforming Bernie 10-1 on corporate donations versus union donations.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're stuck in a political crisis based on the fact that the government insiders do not want to keep the future sequestered and keep us stuck in the 70s. We're not just stuck in the 70s when we go into a family restaurant anywhere in America and James Taylor is singing Fire and Rain, okay? We're stuck in the 70s in the cars we're driving, transportation technologies that are available to us, and also the cancer treatments that we're being given.
Yeah. Well, that's intentional, right? I mean, we have these people that don't want us out of... Well, actually, this technology is over 100 years old. We're driving around in cars and planes.
Tesla, what is it? It's Janet, it's 2016. Tesla began experimenting on vortal teleportation in his famous stay in Colorado Springs, Colorado, in 1899. That was 117 years ago. Nikola Tesla isn't somebody from our parents' generation. He's somebody who's from the generation of most living Americans' great-grandparents' generation. I mean, he was born in, 1858? I mean, Theodore Roosevelt was born in 1858. 1859, that time frame. So I think that we're going to need bold, independent, nonpartisan presidential leadership to break this logjam and reclaim the mantle of leadership in applied science.
Well, we're going to have to, we're coming up on our break and just like a minute here, and I want to go into that. I'm assuming that'll also include some green energy systems and to stop killing ourselves.
Yes, I state that in light of peak oil production peaked in 2005. That was 11 years ago, 11 years ago. In light of the fact that peak oil is a reality and we've already peaked, one of my proposals is, it basically asks the president to ask the Secretary of Energy to review all known free energy claims and try to derive a single application of energy that would be entirely free, cheap to produce, and abundant. And we would develop it for the American economy and then share it with the world. So one of my proposals is essentially my free energy plank. It's to do just that.
Okay, we're going to have to stop at that. We're coming up on break here. So let's hold that thought. Here's our music, and we'll be back at about 6 after the hour, where we will see you then. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, listeners. We'll be back soon.
You are in the Divine Paradigm with Dr. Sasha Lessin and Janet Kira Lessin, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Some call it the height of human civilization.
Share your thoughts by calling the KCOR Digital Radio Network hotline number at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide colors use Skype name KCOR Radio. More positive potential revealed in the exploration of the paranormal after this.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network. Broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
It's time, once again, to unravel the mysteries of the universe by connecting the dots of the higher consciousness.
You get to really sort of enjoy a bizarre ride.
Become part of the show by calling the KCOR Digital Radio Network hotline number at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. Tweet your thoughts anytime by using hashtag KCOR.
It's my favorite thing to do every day.
Escape the Matrix and join the conversation live in our chat room at www.kcorradio.com. Now, back to Divine Paradigm with your enlightened hosts, Dr. Sasha Lesson and Janet Kira Lesson.
Aloha and welcome back to Divine Paradigm with Janet and Dr. Sasha Lesson. And we were talking to Andrew Basiago, and we were talking about advanced secret technologies. Are we finished with that topic before we go to the second one? Okay, Dr. Lesson wants to say something. Go ahead, sweetheart.
Would you please scroll that up so I can see what I...
Oh, wait. Yeah, here it is.
Okay.
1 second. There we go.
So, Andy is telling us that one of the things he's going to be doing, one of the main categories, is launching, when he's president, a new international geophysical year to resolve cosmic mysteries. Andy has written that a true understanding of the cosmos we inhabit is the common heritage of all humanity. Yet fundamental cosmic controversies do persist. And Andy says that the president should declare a new international geophysical year and appoint a blue ribbon commission with subpoena power to investigate and resolve basic cosmological mysteries. These mysteries include whether the Earth is round or flat, whether the Earth is solid or hollow, whether NASA landed men on the moon or hoaxed the lunar landings, and whether the cosmos is natural and organic or artificial and holographic.
Welcome back, Andy.
Yes, indeed. I'm of the opinion that a great intellectual revolution is going on, and it's going on, it began in the United States, and it's going on in our time online, on the internet. For example, the arguments being raised by those who state that the Earth is flat and that there's been a multi-generational conspiracy to suggest that it's round. Some of the arguments that are being made are extremely compelling. And when you ask somebody how can you prove that the Earth is round, they make reference to illustrations that we know have been fabricated by the very individuals fabricating, who stepped forward as whistleblowers, individuals like Matt Boylan, to essentially simulate what a round Earth would look like on behalf of NASA and other space-involved agencies, for example, the National Weather Service and so forth. The notion that satellites are rotating around the Earth or orbiting the Earth. I don't want to be misunderstood here. I'm not coming out as a flat earther, but I'm making the point that the United States of America was the fulfillment of Sir Francis Bacon's The New Atlantis. It was supposed to be the fulfillment of the Enlightenment. And we had a national culture that could not only launch an international geophysical year in 1957, but do a postage stamp around it. It's in my stamp collection. And we've lost sight of that fact. We've become, as Robert Dallek has noted, a culture that worships heroes of consumption like professional athletes rather than heroes of production like inventors. I mean, because I was born into the family of a distinguished electrical engineer, I grew up in New Jersey, not far from the Edison Labs, with Thomas Alva Edison being one of my heroes. We went out to the Edison Labs when I was a kid, and I asked the 96-year-old gentleman who was giving us the tour, who had been an office boy for Thomas Alva Edison, where Mr. Edison took his cat naps. And this man took me over to the far side of the laboratory there at the Edison Labs. and showed me a divot, basically a collapsed area of the floor, where Edison, sort of like a soap dish, a big soap dish shaped divot in the floor, where Edison would sleep. And that was a big thrill for me because I actually crawled down in this little divot in the floor and pretended I was sleeping. I was taking a cat nap where Edison had. And that was a huge thrill for me as a kid, even beyond, working on Project Pegasus. So the problem is that the discourse on the internet began to perform a sort of a review of the given knowledge that we inherit from our parents, the school system that we're educated in, the common culture. And what ended up happening is that a lot of very credible information and arguments began to be generated for the negative positions that we would almost with conceit dismiss as a result of having grown up in the culture that we did. The possibility that the earth is in fact flat. The possibility that in fact, as the Chinese have long claimed, that we did not land men on the moon, but faked or hoaxed the lunar landings. Because some of these issues...
We were at this conference, and Dr. Ken Johnston was there with his, and I'll have to, clue you in on this, but he had, NASA photos from the lunar landings that were not touched up and not altered. So the latest is that, yes, they did film it, but it was just in case their missions didn't work, that there were also missions beyond Apollo 18, all the way up to 20, where they went behind the dark side of the moon, and there was a large ship that they sent a crew in there and filmed. But what they tend to do is put disinformation on top of real information to try to discredit all information, so it confuses people so you don't know what's what.
Right. Well, what I'm saying is maybe that's the direction the investigation will go. Maybe we'll find that the next president will reveal that parts or all of the lunar landing was hoaxed as a matter of filmography, but we really landed on the moon, but they were preparing for a failure of the mission, a failure of the photography, of the filming. The presence,
and that's the public program. There's a secret space program that's behind that, and so hopefully the next president will, be able to.
Well, yeah, one of the things I'd like to see is that the real astronaut that got there before Aldrin and those folks arrived, that person be recognized for the hero that he or she really was.
Right. Apparently, a lot of the astronauts were kind of actors, just like our current president.
Right. See, it's my position that if the government doesn't do that, the very accomplishments that we made will be questioned, and there'll be an abiding and pervasive lack of trust in the government that will never be resolved. So I want to see this handled as literally an international geophysical commission that would be impaneled for a year with subpoena power to pursue these basic cosmological mysteries, maybe 10 that are now current. But my point here is that this is not conspiracy theory. This is actually where the intellectual debate has gone once it became unhinged from officialdom. It went in the direction of people generating very complex information to describe the way the world really is and the ways in which we've been deceived by the U.S. government. That can only be addressed through executive action, and providing the government's official positions on these cosmological questions and the evidence to sustain their position. That's what we haven't gotten.
Cool.
We've gotten mere allegations.
Yeah. So it would be clarified. I mean, that's part of the entire thing that runs through your entire campaign is candor, candor, candor. If it isn't going to compromise national security, you want the truth out there.
Well, my father received the FBI background clearance to do the instrumentation on the lunar module, and when I was having difficulty reading as a first grader in 1967-68, when he was sitting me on his knee and having me take a book from school, and he was reading it with me when he got home from work, he showed me the lunar landing assembly process documents that were identical to the way that they claimed we landed on the moon. Let's say that a Jules Bergman of that era of science reporter was covering, on network television. So I don't have any doubt that there was a reality to the lunar landing on some level. But at the same time, there's so much discrepant data that some contingency plans were indulged that have confused the historical record of what actually happened, and that's what we need to resolve. For the country to ever believe in the government again, we need that kind of thoroughgoing investigation by a commission of distinguished American scientists and social scientists.
So, Andy, you were on Mars, so certainly if we went to Mars, we certainly were on the moon.
Yeah, I'm not predisposed. I'm not predisposed to. Let's look at that. From my perspective, since I know that we had reached Mars, and in fact, before we were reaching Mars via jump room during my era of going there in the early 80s, I know from the French intelligence documents that I was permitted to read that we had reached Mars via rocketry. There were 2 astronauts who died on the surface of Mars in 1964. Okay, so there's all kinds of possible ways that this information could have gotten as convoluted as it did. Maybe, for example, the lunar landing program was and the space shuttle program were essentially public limited hangouts, or in other words, ongoing deceptions, concealing the fact that we had more advanced ways of reaching the moon and other planets, namely through the jump room technology. So there's all sorts of ways this could work out where we'll finally have it all kind of resolved. But we have to resolve it because at this point, not just the American public, but the world public simply does not believe the United States government because it's engaged in several generations of patent lying about basic cosmological formulations. And that's no longer tenable.
So one of the things that we saw at the Laughlin conference by Steve Bassett is that Hillary made an announcement that she's going to get behind Roswell and the extraterrestrial presence on the planet, and she was talking about, she's been associated with the Rockefeller Initiative in the late 90s, she and Bill. So you have a policy called Developing an ET Contact Policy.
Could I jump in here? Because there's actually 3
yes, jump in
ET.
there.
These are kind of long, and I want to cover a lot of material. But these are my 3 ET policies. The first thing that the American president has to do is go on national television and acknowledge that we are being visited and that we've been visited since antiquity. Now, he also has to go beyond the conventional propagation of the standard exopolitical position here. See, it's my allegation that exopolitics has been infiltrated. I know, for example, that when I was introduced to Stephen Greer in 1980 at College of the Siskiyous, when I was in my training to go to Mars, he was introduced to me as Steve from the CIA. Okay.
Wow.
You also factor in the completely witheringly contemptuous and unfair treatment I've gotten from Mr. Bassett, Steve Bassett, going all over ufology and exopolitics, making the false allegation that I'm CIA, when in fact I've been transparent about the fact that I worked for DARPA in Project Pegasus and then for the CIA in the Mars project, wasn't even paid. Basically, my labor was conscripted from me.
You're a child.
I was a child and then a college student in the second instance. I believe. Let me just cut to the point here. I believe that the position that all we need is disclosure from the government is itself a deception. Because, for example, there's never any discussion of why there was an uptick in extraterrestrial visits to our planet after World War II. And I know the reason for that. It was discussed between my father and I, and I've even found it and derived the explanation from the literature. The post-war saucer flap was related to the fact that we were starting to undertake what would be most injurious to the physical substrates of the universe. In other words, we were starting to undertake what would be most alarming to the inhabitants of other star systems. We were beginning to blow up atomic weapons, and by so doing, begin to destroy, at least locally, physical substrates of the universe. So the rote measure public policy mantra that we need disclosure. No, we don't just need disclosure about the fact that we are being visited and have since antiquity, but in earnest for about 60, 70 years here. We also need the reason why, or the reasons why. And I believe the American president needs to tell the people of the United States and the world that not only are we being visited, but were being visited by extraterrestrials who were alarmed that we were blowing up atomic weapons and possessed the rockets and the space planes to take those atomic weapons into space. That's what the conventional disclosure movement never addresses. And then they never address something far more subtle, but which is also maybe even more important to address as a matter of public policy, is since we did alarm the rest of the universe of our presence here on this rocker arm of the Milky Way galaxy, approximately 65 million light years from the relative center of that galaxy, since we did put the rest of the cosmos, or at least a large part of the galaxy, on notice that we're here, right in this location, we also have to develop, as a matter of public policy, a contact policy. Because we know from nature that nature presents us with life forms that are benevolent, neutral, and hostile. In the ocean, we could say, let's say, dolphins, sturgeon, and sharks. At least sometimes sharks will attack us. Often dolphins will aid us. They'll aid drowning swimmers. And then there's many species in the ocean that are neutral as to human life. But by extrapolating from that would indicate, at least as a matter of first impression, that that's the way the universe may be constructed. There may be extraterrestrials coming here who are benevolent, neutral, and hostile to our interests as Earthlings. So in addition to informing the people that we're being visited and revealing as a matter of openness about our atomic warfaring activities, that the increase in extraterrestrial visitations resulted from the fact that we were beginning to blow up atomic weapons, we also have to begin the public discussion of what kind of contact policy we should have. I believe it should be one that's subtle and nuanced and that acknowledges that the groups that will be coming either do already or could potentially represent all of the above. We don't want to obviously attack friendlies. We don't want to be naive and view all visitors as our space brothers. There may be some species that evolved in their star system because they were very benevolent, and others that evolved and became the dominant species because they were very malevolent. So I think,
and there may be Ferengi out there just coming here to harvest all of our stuff and not give a damn about who's there already. There's apparently a species that is very unconscious about existing life, kind of like Americans, and they go in and just harvest the resources, and they don't really give a damn about what's already there.
The hard neutral position where they will come to exploit us without a clear malevolent intent, but one that is not necessarily in our interests as Earthlings. So there's been no discussion of that, and we've already prompted the visits as a result of doing the incredibly cosmically provocative thing of destroying the physical substrates of the universe. Every time we blow up an atomic weapon, we've blown up over 2,100 atomic weapons since Hiroshima. The United States has been responsible for about 60% of those explosions. Most of the rest were performed by Russia, by the former Soviet Union and Russia. There haven't been a lot of explosions since the early 90s. We have reached a kind of a workable detente around them. However, it was this kind of activity that led the visitors to come, and now we have to have a broadly based public policy debate about how to respond to not what I would call, what I don't view it as what Dr. David Jacobs views it as the threat, but I would just say as what we should now do about the phenomenon of extraterrestrial visitation. Yeah. And by the way, this was one of the things that I was mocked for today in the Huffington Post. I was ridiculed today, March 1st, 2016, for stating that as president, I would give a national televised address announcing the fact that we're not alone in the universe and that we're being visited by extraterrestrials. I was ridiculed for that today, even though the U.S. government released 10,000 UFO reports back in the 1980s, over 10,000 sightings.
Andy, maybe the fact that the Huffington Post is challenging you this way will make people really say, let's look at the evidence. Yeah. And, it could really work in your favor. It's so obvious to anyone that's examined the material that there has been extensive, since antiquity, this nuclear disturbance that the Federation, supposedly the Sumerians were told, was upset about the nuclear wars on Nibiru, where our ancestors came from, and the nuclear war that wiped out the southern half of the Salt Sea, which became the Dead Sea, and Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities of Canaan back in 2024 BCE.
Okay, we have about 3 minutes or 4 minutes till break. I just wanted to say, well, you're talking about, it reminds me of the Star Trek movie where warp drive was the point where they moved past secrecy to first contact with the species of a planet. So maybe this, like you said, they started to visit us because we have atomic weapons. We have a question real quick. Andy, what do you think of Captain K? Captain Kramer, who said he served 17 years on Mars. And then we have a break in a couple minutes.
Well, I was hoping to bring other whistleblowers forward. And after Randy Kramer, which is the real name apparently of Captain K, after he came forward, I studied his material and I identified 10 patterns in his claims that supported him as an authentic whistleblower. In fact, he didn't have the birth years of the 6 people we've identified of the 11 who were trained under Major Ed Dames at College of the Siskiyous to go to Mars, the training having occurred in summer of 1980 and then the first jumps in summer of 1981 of our group. But he stated that he first went to Mars at age 17, which turned out to be the median average of those 6 jumpers, which I found extraordinary. And so I wrote a piece called Corroborating Captain Kramer.
Great.
I've taken a closer look, and some of the things either being stated by Randy Kramer or by those speaking for him give me less confidence in his veracity. For example, on the History Channel, it was claimed that his Mars experiences both began and ended as a result of an abduction experience by Men in Black. And I know from the Men in Black literature and my own Men in Black case, my own sighting, or encounter with the Men in Black after a UFO sighting virtually over my house in Morris Plains, New Jersey as a kid in the presence of my father, who was an informed witness. He was an expert on different jets, aircraft that exist in the world and so forth, and stated that this thing we saw in the sky couldn't be from any country on this planet. So I had a Men in Black experience in my childhood, and I studied the literature, and there is really no pattern of abduction by Men in Black. They have visited people, they've questioned people. It usually seems to be post hoc to a UFO sighting in a neighborhood-type setting rather than, let's say, something more elaborate involving an abduction. But at least on the History Channel, Randy Kramer is being credited with claiming that his Mars experiences were sort of brought about as a result of contact with the Men in Black. And then as I began to examine his recent comments in Yelm, he spent the first hour recapitulating Nazi aerospace conspiracy theory from the internet. So what I've decided to do is not just denounce Randy Kramer and then, of course, Corey Goode without investigating their claims. I'm going to take some time off after the campaign and sit down with their material and then publish my opinion as to whether I believe them or not. At this point, I'm starting to lean towards the possibility.
We have to hold that thought. Sure. Okay, we'll pick that up after the break. So we're going to sit down with Randy Kramer and Corey Goode's information, and we'll be back in just about 3 minutes.
You are in the Divine Paradigm with Dr. Sasha Lessin and Janet Kira Lessin, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Some call it the height of human civilization.
Share your thoughts by calling the KCOR Digital Radio Network hotline number at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide colors use Skype name KCOR Radio. More positive potential revealed in the exploration of the paranormal after this.
Alien Deceptions, a suspenseful sci-fi romance thriller by Tina Marie, featuring the tantalizing Erica Jones and the mysterious Russell Hamilton. An out-of-this-world book of fiction based on years of document facts and files the government does not want you to know about, at least not yet. Alien Deceptions by Tina Marie. Available now at Amazon.com or get a signed copy at TinaMarieEntertainment.com. Get your copy now.
Hello? I can't hear you, but you can hear me, right?
Now, hang on, I want to make sure I understand. So a non-citizen can go over to a hospital and walk in and get emergency treatment. That never happens here.
What happens? Jobs are created. Guess what happens? The economy grows. Then you have more people paying taxes. Do they not understand?
I don't want to hear any more about Islam. I don't want to hear one more word about Islam. Take your religion and shove it up your behind. I'm sick of you.
Fatigued by the identical mind-numbing viewpoints up and down the dial?
You fat pig who lies on his back all day, demanding that everybody else subsidize them. What do, jerk? All right.
Well, listen to the master of provocative insight, Dwight Lilly, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network, Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. Whether it's local or national news, Dwight has his finger on the pulse of the nation.
So now you've got a case where Cliven Bundy, in an interview first broke in the New York Times, his comments are beyond repugnant to me. They are beyond despicable to me. They are beyond ignorant to me.
The Dwight Lilly Show, never restrained and always opinions. Talk without the fluff.
The world is about to change forever.
Get your weekly dose of truth every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific and 10 p.m. Eastern, and Thursday nights, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, only on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Where'd that shot come from? Alpha 3 to Eagle 1. We've got company.
From Tay Publishing, codename Eagle Force, the saga begins.
I see them, Alpha 3. All units stay low and let them come.
From the eyes of a special ops officer, Joe Michael Riggy brings to life this amazing story of survival, the unknown and the unexpected.
Here they come. Hold your fire. Hold. Now.
Codename Eagle Force at TayPublishing.com.
What if maintaining a healthy weight was as simple as drinking a cup of coffee? With Valentis Coffee, it's that easy. Harvested from the world's most pristine coffee farms and packed with the purest ingredients on earth, Valentis takes losing weight to a completely new level. At Valentis, we believe everyone deserves a chance to be healthy and fit. It's pure, natural, healthy, and delicious. Click the Valentis Healthiest Coffee banner on the KCOR Digital Radio Network website and take the Weight Loss Guarantee Challenge. Valentis Coffee, simply the world's healthiest coffee.
It's time, once again, to unravel the mysteries of the universe by connecting the dots of the higher consciousness.
You get to really sort of enjoy a bizarre ride.
Become part of the show by calling the KCOR Digital Radio Network hotline number at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. Tweet your thoughts anytime by using hashtag KCOR.
It's my favorite thing to do every day.
Escape the Matrix and join the conversation live in our chat room at www.kcorradio.com. Now, back to Divine Paradigm with your enlightened hosts, Dr. Sasha Lessin and Janet Kira Lessin.
Aloha, we're back. I'm Janet Kira Lessin with Dr. Sasha Lessin and our special guest, the future President of the United States, Andrew D. Basiago. But on the road to that presidency, I'd like to pick up where we left off before the break, which was Andy's going to tell us about Corey Good and Randy Kramer. And let me read this one point that he has on his 100 points. Mars transparency. The president should disclose the existence of the secret U.S. presence on the red planet. And Mars has been visited by U.S. personnel for more than 50 years, yet America's presence on Mars remains shrouded in official secrecy. The next president should appoint a special prosecutor to call Edwin Aldrin, Barack Obama, Regina Dugan, Richard Cheney, and other Mars insiders to testify under oath about the CIA's Mars Jump Room program, the Mars Colony Corporation, and related matters. Simultaneously, the president should seek a UN treaty protecting Mars's fragile ecology and civilization from visitation, exploration, habitation, and colonization by Earthlings. And we do have people planning to go to the Mars, several programs, but take it. Oh, do you want anything you want to say, Sasha? Okay, take it away, Andy.
Well, we were just commenting on the fact that I'm withholding judgment as to the credibility, basically, of Randy Kramer and Corey Goode. In all fairness, it was my goal to bring other Mars experiencers forward, so I don't want to be egotistical and undermine their public platform to have their truths be known in the way that I fought for almost a decade to be listened to and to be understood to be telling the truth. So I don't really know whether they're telling the truth. I would say this, and that is that there's a line of claimants that tells essentially the story of the Mars Jump Room. It includes Michael C. Relf, Arthur Neumann, myself, William B. Stillings, Bernard Mendez. Those are 5 jumpers, with the additional corroboration of Laura Eisenhower being invited to go to the Mars colony, but she didn't know when she was disclosing that on radio that the device that was described to her as what would take her to Mars, she provided the acronym. She said she was going to go via ARC, and she presumed that they meant the space planes, and she presumed that they were referring to the space planes utilizing the terminology associated with Noah's Ark, ARK. But in fact, the people working with her are trying to get her to go to Mars, to settle on Mars with her 2 sons who were then 10 years of age. We're referring to the acronym for Aeronautical Repositioning Chamber, which is the jump rooms. So my point there is that we have these 6 highly credible, highly intelligent individuals, all of whom, only 3 of whom knew each other. That is William and Bernard and I, as a result of being trained together and sometimes deployed on the surface of Mars together back in the early 80s. But we lived in different parts of the country. We worked in different fields. We didn't know each other when the truth movement began to investigate these claims of Mars visitation. And that was an incredible blow to the world of the alphabet intelligence agencies. Here you had 6 highly credible American adults with no history of psychiatric illness, no history of false claims, no significant history of drug or alcohol abuse, no criminal histories, who were agreeing on the basic reality of the jump room experience. Now, on the heels of our claims that lasted roughly from when I began talking about my time travel experiences in 2009 through roughly for a 5-year period into 2014, in the last 2 years, we've had the claims of Randy Kramer and Corey Goode. Well, first of all, Randy Kramer was brought forward by Dr. Michael Salla, who's a known prevaricator. And I have information that I have not yet brought forward, establishing that Dr. Salla is an employee of the Australian intelligence service, ASIO. So that does something to undermine the platform on which Randy would otherwise be standing. Before we went to break, I talked about the fact that Randy's claiming, or at least the History Channel is claiming that Randy has claimed, that his Mars experiences began as a result of an abduction by men in black. The problem is that after 70 years after the end of World War II and the uptick in extraterrestrial visitations to our planet, there haven't been abductions by men in black. There's been surveillance, harassment, intimidation by the men in black, but not abduction. So my point here is that I think what may be going on is that several military intelligence operatives were dropped into exopolitics to have an effect on the 2 things that disturbs the alphabet agencies the most: the revelation of personnel and of technology. They're always trying to prevent the revelation of their sources and methods. And what I find curious about the public testimony of Randy Kramer and Corey Good is they seldom or never mention those of us who have already given our testimony in the jump room about the jump room experience. So they're basically not reporting our previous Mars testimony, which should be viewed as supportive. And they're also concealing the jump room technology by never talking about it. Why would they even have to go to Mars in space planes years after the jump rooms were reduced to practice? It doesn't make sense.
Right.
So because of these inconsistencies, I'm not saying that they're liars, and I'm not saying that they're, CIA agents or whatever. I'm saying that by their own testimony, they both describe how they are military personnel who were asked to come forward by their own commanding officers. That's also a tremendous claim that I don't find highly credible, at least on its face.
One of the claims was that there are like 5 or 6 secret space programs, and there are different factions that own them. And the only explanation I can think with what you're saying, or not the only, but one explanation is perhaps they were in a program that didn't have the same technologies. One of the programs was supposed to get the throwaway technology from the other programs, something like that.
That may be the case, Janet. I don't know. I don't mean to cast aspersions. I'm just pledging that after the election in November, I'm going to sit down with their material and then issue a public statement about whether I believe their claims or not. At this point, I have doubts, and that's really where my investigation is. I'm not declaiming their credibility in any way.
It would be great to have everybody on the same program and have a discussion, or at least in the same living room, and have
I was actually trying to organize a conference in Hawaii with all of us. So I've been working on it in an open and democratic way. I've been trying to arrange a conference in Hawaii with the Mars experiencers, with everybody. So
we'll pick that up again.
Remain to be addressed, yes.
Yes. Sasha, you have a question?
Oh, no, I just want the listeners to know that I've totally checked out the internal consistency of everything that Andy's saying. I've looked in his eyes. I'm trained in neurolinguistic programming. Andy is telling you the truth. He ain't making up anything. And what's more, the jump room that where you wound up in New Mexico I recently saw an interview of the next door neighbors that talked about all the coming and goings that you've mentioned. So there's so much. If anyone is willing to look at the evidence, Andy is telling the truth. I'm absolutely sure of it.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the final version of Packing for Mars, but you're one of the main stars in it, and they're basically doing a search to validate your claims, and they go to several locations, and the last being the amphitheater where, who was it, Rumsfeld was talking to the young time space jumpers. Did you get to see it yet? It won.
No, my friend Bill Johnson from Phoenix just brought out a signed copy of the DVD from Frank Jacobs and my long and dear friend Tanya Maidenford, the other producer of Packing.
Yes.
So I just will have the opportunity actually to not see it because I never watch my own stuff because I don't want to become self-conscious. So just as an old acting.
Well, I recommend it. It was very good. It won the best, the popular vote at the IUFO Congress, and
that must have been
Andy. And there was Andy.
Yeah. So I was talking about that subterranean amphitheater, and now people have filmed it. Okay, so I couldn't have gone out to the approach to Madrid, New Mexico, and built a 50-year-old amphitheater underground. I don't have that ability as a stonemason.
And they had a hidden camera, and they walked up to the locals. They just started having a conversation, and they validated it. It's like they had seen something or heard something strange back, 50 years ago when it was happening. The same with the Indian school. They stopped the UPS guy, and they said that Indian building, was that a school? At one time, he said yes, and they said, when did it close? About 15 years ago. So you had several different episodes in their journey where they
the old school
validated
site,
your information. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the old school site Lame is where we were medically and cognitively examined after teleporting to Santa Fe. We would be bussed out to Lamy, and that actually had a sign on the awning that said the old school site. But also maybe just to cite some another luminary on the scene, Governor Jesse Ventura. When Governor Ventura took me out to 20 Grand Canyon Avenue, which was that house in White Rock, New Mexico, where I stayed with my father first in the summer of 1973 and then the summer of 1972, because we had gone on a transept from fall of 1971 to summer of 73. And then we jumped back to the fall of 71, progressed in real time into 1972, and then stayed for the second time in that house the previous summer. Ordinarily, B would follow A, but in this case it was the opposite. So we stayed there in summer of 73, and then the second time we stayed there in the summer of 72. So we knew things that my father's friend Connie Chavez did not know would be happening in the future when we were interacting with her in 1972, the second summer, at that location. I had described how we had stayed there, and when we met the woman then living there, when Jesse took me out there with Sean Stone and with his son Tyrell Ventura in August of 2011 to that location, the woman living there stated that I had accurately described the unusual nature of the floor plan of that house. It has a quick bedroom on the left and then a kitchen on the left, and then a kind of an open area where there's a dining room table and then a bedroom and bathroom complex on the far right side of the house. So I knew the interior design of her house, but also, as we were practically leaving, I think it was Sean Stone asked her whether she had ever heard, it might have been Governor Ventura, but one of the hosts there asked her whether she had ever heard of Harold Agnew and Project Pegasus, and she stated in the affirmative. So, 35 years after my father and I had stayed there, 40 years later, this woman now living in the house had heard of both the special access program that I was on and the individual who it was under, which was Dr. Agnew, Harold M. Agnew, when he was the director of Los Alamos National Laboratory. So I thought that was some pretty interesting local color as well.
Well, what would you like to cover next?
Well, why don't
Anything else you want
I'd
to say?
like previews of the, because we'll go into in great depth, your platform's statements that you would go for the criminal prosecution of the last two presidents and a real investigation of the truth that most informed Americans know about how the Twin Towers were brought down as a false flag event to curtail our civil liberties and make war on Iraq.
All right, the dust is beginning to settle, finally, after 15 years on 9/11, 15 years now. And, or this year, it'll be 15 years. And what looks like happened is that the Saudi regime was responsible, and that the attacks were done with the complicity of the Bush administration to create a pretext for the United States going to war in Afghanistan and in Iraq in light of the looming reality of peak oil, which would have been a national security justification. And so this theory of 9/11 is contained, or is said to be contained, in 28 pages. It's generally not widely known among the American people and among voters that the original 9/11 Commission, the only one that we've seen, the only official one we've seen, classified not 28 documents, but simply 28 pages of their report, which was entitled Foreign Sources of Funding for 9/11 Hijackers, that revealed that the attacks of 9/11 were perpetrated by the Saudi regime to blame Iraq for, so that the United States and other major powers could, and in concert with the Saudi regime, could go to war against the regime of Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Now, if that's the case, then given the mass murder that occurred, mass murder is one form of genocide. That would indicate that if Bush and Cheney were complicit in that, they are complicit in crimes against humanity. It must be prosecuted as such under the Nuremberg Doctrine. His part we have this whole issue of who founded ISIS. It looks like there's a colorable claim that one of the founders of ISIS was Barack Obama himself. Now, look at what ISIS was doing before they had the holy hell bombed out of them by the Russian government. The rather heroic actions undertaken by Vladimir Putin of Russia. One thing they were doing, that ISIS was doing, was beheading Christians because of their religion, which is a form of genocide. And certainly when ISIS executed the Jordanian pilot via immolation, namely burning him alive at the time that he had the status of a POW, indisputably, under the Nuremberg Doctrine, that was a war crime, because the execution of POWs is a war crime. In fact, in public international law, the example that is most usually cited is the execution by the Soviet army of the Polish officers in the Katyn forest, a crime that was long blamed on the Nazis. In fact, it was perpetrated by the Soviet government. So here we have two American presidents, one who was complicit in an act of urban terrorism for which 3,000 immediate victims died, 4,000 American troops, hundreds of thousands of Iraqis and Afghan citizens, that cost two wars that cost the United States $2 trillion. Almost as many dollars as were lost, as announced the day before by Donald Rumsfeld, who announced that $2.3 trillion were missing from the Pentagon budget. And finding those dollars is one of my 100 proposals, by the way, so that's why I'm citing it. But in any case, the last two American presidents have been complicit in serious violations of the Nuremberg principles, and I believe must be prosecuted as international criminals. And that's a very serious statement, but I stand by it. And I will not be gloating as a secret chrononaut, as Barack Obama ridiculed me when I came forward identifying him as a participant in the Mars Jump Room program. I will simply be implementing the very Nuremberg principles that our country was responsible for establishing when we prosecuted 26 top Nazis at Nuremberg in 1946. And
Thank you. I'm really glad to hear that. Yes, I'm really glad to hear that that you're not going to let this slide by. This is critical.
Yeah. Now, on the more of the reform front, one of the proposals I'm making, I want to cite it because I want to show how we need presidential leadership to both bring the conventional realm of our society forward and make it more innovative in its thinking, and also to some extent temper some of the irrational exuberance and the paranoia that we find online. It's often stated that because of its different activities as a malefactor over the decades since it was created in 1947, that we should do to the CIA what President Kennedy once in an offhand comment suggested we should, which is, break it into 1,000 pieces and cast it to the four corners of the earth. I don't believe in a world as dangerous and hostile, however, that we can afford to do that. But what can we do to reform the CIA to make it a better actor? Well, how about transitioning as much of its activity as possible to open source intelligence? In other words, what about a reform program within CIA in which we still might engage in different forms of spying, but at different points we would make our findings as a government public? In other words, we would move beyond Cold War concealment and secrecy and revolutionize the CIA and make it into sort of the super university of American society. That's one of my proposals. Not to engage in the Nemayanist madness of deciding not to have an intelligence agency in a world like this, where other superpowers, for example, Russia, do, and China and so forth. One in which, in fact, industrial espionage has become $1 trillion enterprise. Recognize that many of the functions that are being performed by the intelligence agency would be more instructive, more beneficial to our society and what it claims to be its way of life if there was far less secrecy and far more openness regarding the sources and the findings of intelligence. In that way, the people can police the president, for example. and the decisions that the president makes responsive to intelligence findings.
John Kennedy was so concerned about the Nazi infiltration of the CIA under Alec Dulles that he created another intelligence agency. Does that agency still exist, and do you have any faith in it?
My understanding is that President Kennedy wanted to place the intelligence function under military intelligence and was planning to destroy the CIA. And in that way, he would maintain power over the CIA by being the president in a form of government in which there was civilian rule. And he would be able, as commander-in-chief, to maintain control of the intelligence function and the U.S. intelligence community. I can certainly say from my own experiences that, I have gotten information, my information has been derived by myself, but information has reached me about the fact that I have somewhat of a following in the CIA. There are a lot of people in CIA who believe that I and whistleblowers like Edward Snowden, for example, are to be lauded for coming forward because we actually have protected the country from either not utilizing a valuable technology that we'll ultimately utilize, namely my teleportation advocacy, or in the case of Mr. Snowden, the fact that he warned us that the NSA was spying on all of our electronic communications as private citizens in a mass ongoing violation of the Fourth Amendment prohibition on unreasonable searches and seizures. So we can't assume that there aren't forces of change within the intelligence community who are actually supporting a more open model and view individuals like myself and Edward Snowden as catalysts for positive change in that area. So one of my proposals is to do just that and to transition the CIA and the other alphabet intelligence agencies to open source intelligence.
Andy, we're running out of time. We have one more minute. Can you tell our listeners about your website and how they can reach you?
Yeah, my thank you. I certainly can. My campaign website is at andy2016.com, and sometime in the next week or so, there's a feature that's going to go up there called Proposals, and this is 100 JPEGs, 100 images that contain each of my proposals, and I would welcome your listeners to read through them and then start downloading them and sending them. We'll have a zip file. They can download all 100, or they're all embedded into the webpage there that will say Proposals as downloadable image files, and just start sending to their friends and family members, and let's go about the business of creating a new agenda for this country.
Excellent. That's a good point to close. Thank you very much, listeners, for joining us on the Divine Paradigm. Janet Care Lesson and Dr. Sasha Lesson. Aloha. Blessings.
In 3, 2, 1.
Until next week, we must leave the world of the divine paradigm. But always remember, you all exist on more than one plane or dimension. And there is a shift coming. A shift to universal consciousness. A shift to the divine paradigm.
Divine paradigm. Divine paradigm.
For more information on the divine paradigm, as well as the hosts, Dr. Sasha Lesson and Janet Kira Lesson, please visit their website at aquarianradio.com. Divine Paradigm, live every Tuesday afternoon, 2:30 p.m. Pacific, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Your transformational future is at hand.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51. Wait, that doesn't exist. This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
Have you heard? Metro by T-Mobile now includes Amazon Prime. Yes, enjoy the best of shopping and entertainment, movies, TV shows, music, free shipping, and much more. All included for just $40 per line for 3 lines. All on the T-Mobile network. Discover the smarter way. Metro by T-Mobile. That's genius. One offer per account. Offer subject to change. $12.99 per month value. Offer valid for new Amazon Prime members. Metro customers may notice reduced speeds versus some T-Mobile customers. Video at 480p. Capable device required. See store for details and terms and conditions.